The service advisor greeting you with that practice smile and clipboard already knows exactly how much money they plan to extract from you today, and that figure has almost nothing to do with what your truck actually needs. Before you even explained why you brought your vehicle in, before any mechanic touched a single component, before any diagnostic equipment got connected, a target number was established based on your truck's age, mileage, and service history in their system. That advisor has been trained extensively and deliberately in techniques designed to maximize that number, to transform a simple oil change into an $800 service visit, to escalate routine maintenance into fear-based spending on repairs you do not need. And the strategies they use are so refined, so psychologically sophisticated, that most truck owners never realize they are being manipulated until they are already driving away. Several $100s poorer having authorized work that provided zero actual benefit. Walk into any dealership service department right now and watch the process unfold. A customer arrives for an oil change, a service that costs maybe $40 in parts and takes 15 minutes to perform. The advisor welcomes them warmly, takes their keys, promises a complimentary multi-point inspection while the oil is being changed, and sends the truck back to the service bays. What happens during that inspection is where the real profit gets generated, because those technicians are not just checking fluid levels and tire pressure. They are working from an inspection sheet specifically designed to identify upselling opportunities, items they can flag as needing attention regardless of actual condition, creating a foundation for the advisor to build recommendations that sound urgent and necessary, but are often completely fabricated. 30 minutes later, that advisor returns holding a printed inspection report covered in red marks and concerned notations. They sit down with a serious expression and begin explaining all the issues their technicians discovered. Your air filter is dirty and restricting airflow, reducing fuel economy and engine performance. Your cabin air filter is clogged with debris and potentially circulating harmful particles. Your brake fluid has absorbed moisture and needs flushing to prevent internal corrosion. Your transmission fluid is degraded and should be replaced to protect expensive components. Your differential fluid is overdue for service. Your coolant is contaminated and requires a complete system flush. The advisor presents each item with practiced concern, explaining the risks of delaying these services, mentioning safety implications, suggesting that ignoring these recommendations could lead to far more expensive repairs down the road. The total estimate for addressing all these newly discovered issues comes to $750, and most customers, overwhelmed by the apparent urgency and the technical language, agree to at least some of the recommendations, believing the dealership is protecting their investment and helping them avoid future problems. But here is what actually just happened and why almost nothing that advisor told you represents genuine need. Let me break down each common scam individually, showing you exactly how to identify them and what these services actually cost versus what dealerships charge. The air filter scam runs first because it generates pure profit with minimal effort. The advisor shows you your engine air filter, which does indeed look dirty because air filters accumulate dirt, that is literally their function, and explains that this restriction is costing you fuel economy and power. What they do not mention is that air filters are designed to function effectively even when they appear quite dirty, and the actual restriction point where performance suffers does not occur until the filter is far more clogged than what they are showing you. That filter probably has another 10,000 miles of effective life remaining, but the dealership charges $75 to $90 to replace a filter you could buy for $18 at any auto parts store and install yourself in 45 seconds by unclipping 2 fasteners and dropping in the new filter. The test is simple. When they show you the dirty air filter, ask them to perform an actual airflow restriction test using a manometer, a tool that measures the pressure drop across the filter. If restriction exceeds manufacturer specifications, replacement is justified. If not, the filter is fine, regardless of appearance. Dealerships almost never perform this test because most filters they recommend replacing would pass easily. An objective measurement eliminates the fear-based selling that drives this scam. They rely instead on visual comparison, holding your slightly dirty filter next to a pristine new one and letting you draw the conclusion they want. The cabin air filter scam follows identical logic, but adds health-based fear to the financial pressure. These filters, which clean air entering the passenger compartment, are hidden behind the glove box in most trucks, somewhere customers never see and cannot easily access, which allows advisors to make dramatic claims about contamination and health risks without the customer having any reference point for normal condition. The dealership charges $60 to $80 to replace a filter that costs $12 and requires no tools to install, just removing the glove box by pressing 2 tabs and sliding in the new filter. The entire job takes 3 minutes if you have never done it before, 90 seconds once you know where it is. When they recommend cabin air filter replacement, ask to see the actual filter removed from your truck, not a random dirty filter they keep in the shop specifically for demonstrating to customers. Inspect it yourself. If you can see light through it clearly when held up to overhead lighting, if air flows through it easily when you blow on it, the filter is functioning fine. Even filters that look somewhat dirty are typically still effective because the filtration media is designed with substantial capacity. Replace it yourself for $12 when it actually restricts airflow, not when a service advisor claims it looks bad. The brake fluid flush scam adds urgency through safety implications, which makes customers far more likely to authorize the service immediately. The advisor explains that brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs moisture over time, and this moisture causes internal corrosion in brake components and reduces the fluid's boiling point, potentially causing brake fade under heavy use. All of this is technically true, but what they omit is the time frame involved. Brake fluid does absorb moisture, but this process takes years, and most trucks will never experience conditions where the reduced boiling point matters unless you are racing or descending mountain passes while towing maximum loads regularly. The dealership charges $150 to $200 for this service, which involves opening bleeder valves at each wheel and pumping fresh fluid through until the old fluid is displaced. This is legitimate maintenance that should be performed eventually, but the interval is much longer than dealerships claim. Check your owner's manual for the actual manufacturer recommended interval, which is typically every 3 to 5 years or 60,000 miles. If you are within this interval and not experiencing any brake issues, the service is not needed despite what the inspection report claims. When it is genuinely due, independent shops perform identical service for $60 to $80, less than half what dealerships charge. The transmission fluid scam might be the most profitable because the service costs are high and the fear factor is extreme. Transmissions are expensive components that most people do not understand, which makes them perfect targets for scam services. The advisor explains that transmission fluid breaks down over time, losing its protective qualities, and regular replacement prevents costly repairs. They show you fluid extracted from your transmission, often displayed next to fresh fluid for dramatic visual contrast, and explain that the dark color indicates severe degradation requiring immediate service. The quote comes to $350 to $500, depending on whether they recommend a simple drain and fill or a complete flush. Here is what they are not telling you. Transmission fluid does darken with use, but color change alone does not indicate failure. The fluid could be perfectly functional despite being darker than new fluid, because the additives that protect your transmission do not evaporate or disappear just because the fluid changes color. The actual test of transmission fluid condition involves checking for burning smell, which indicates overheating damage, or metallic particles, which indicate internal wear. Dark color by itself means nothing. Additionally, many modern trucks use lifetime transmission fluid that never requires changing under normal use. But dealerships conveniently ignore this specification because it eliminates a profitable service opportunity. Check your owner's manual for the actual transmission service interval. Many trucks specify intervals of 100,000 miles or more, some have no interval at all. If you are not near the specified mileage and have not experienced any transmission issues, you do not need this service regardless of what the inspection report claims. When service is genuinely due, a simple drain and fill performed at an independent shop costs $100 to $150 and provides equivalent protection to the expensive flush services dealerships push. The differential service scam operates on customer ignorance about what a differential even is, let alone when it needs service. Most truck owners have never thought about their differential, do not know where it is located, and certainly do not know the service intervals, which makes them completely dependent on the dealership's recommendations. The advisor explains that differential fluid lubricates gears under extreme pressure and must be changed regularly to prevent expensive failure. The service costs $120 to $180, and because most customers have no reference point for whether this is necessary, they often authorize it assuming the dealership knows best. The actual service interval for differential fluid varies by manufacturer, but typically falls between 50,000 and 100,000 miles for trucks used normally. If you tow frequently or drive in extreme conditions, shorter intervals make sense. For normal use, the long interval is appropriate. Check your owner's manual for the specification, and unless you are approaching or past that mileage, skip the service regardless of recommendations. When it is genuinely needed, the job requires removing a fill plug, removing a drain plug, waiting for old fluid to drain, and adding new fluid until it reaches the proper level. Any shop can perform this for $60 to $80, less than half what dealerships charge, and you can do it yourself for $30 in fluid and 40 minutes of time. The coolant flush scam relies on visual contamination that sounds alarming but rarely indicates actual problems. The advisor shows you coolant extracted from your radiator, points out that it looks rusty or contains particles, and explains that this contamination will cause overheating or internal corrosion requiring expensive repairs. The flush service costs $150 to $250 and involves draining the old coolant, flushing the system with water or cleaning solution, and refilling with fresh coolant. This sounds reasonable until you understand that coolant discoloration is often normal aging that does not affect performance, and particles are frequently just mineral deposits from the water used to mix the coolant, not internal corrosion. The legitimate test is checking coolant pH and freeze protection using inexpensive test strips available at any parts store for $8. If the pH is within specification and freeze protection is adequate, the coolant is functioning correctly regardless of appearance. The actual service interval is typically every 5 years or 100,000 miles, whichever comes first. Outside this interval, you do not need the service. When it is genuinely due, you can drain and refill the system yourself for $35 in coolant and an hour of time, or have any shop do it for $80, far less than dealership pricing. But beyond these individual scams, the most insidious manipulation happens through bundling and urgency creation. After presenting all these recommendations, the advisor offers a package deal, suggesting you can save money by having everything done today rather than separately later. This sounds reasonable, but it is actually a psychological manipulation tactic called price anchoring. The individual prices were inflated intentionally, so the package discount makes the total seem more acceptable, even though you are still paying far more than these services cost anywhere else, for work you mostly do not need yet. The urgency creation comes through safety implications and failure predictions. The advisor mentions that your brakes might fade under heavy use with contaminated fluid, that your transmission might fail if you continue driving on degraded fluid, that your engine might overheat with old coolant. These are not outright lies, but they are worst-case scenarios presented as likely outcomes, designed to create enough fear that you authorize repairs immediately rather than researching whether they are actually necessary. The dealership knows that customers who leave to think about it or get second opinions rarely return, so creating urgency that forces immediate decisions is critical to maximizing revenue. The protection against all these scams is simple but requires discipline. First, never authorize any service beyond what you specifically came in for without leaving and researching the recommendations independently. The advisor will pressure you, suggesting that driving the truck in its current condition is risky, but this is almost never true. Politely decline all additional services, pay for your oil change, and leave. Second, consult your owner's manual for actual service intervals on every recommended item. The manual provides manufacturer specifications free from profit motive. Third, get quotes from independent shops for any service that is genuinely due. You will discover that dealership prices are typically double or triple what other shops charge for identical work. Fourth, learn to perform basic services yourself. Air filters, cabin filters, and simple fluid changes require minimal tools and skill, but save hundreds of dollars annually while eliminating exposure to dealership upselling. Fifth, find an independent mechanic you trust, someone who maintains their business through quality work rather than aggressive upselling, and build a relationship where they perform your maintenance at fair prices without constantly pushing unnecessary services. The service department generates more profit for most dealerships than vehicle sales, and that profit comes almost entirely from convincing customers they need services earlier than manufacturer specifications require, at prices far higher than market rates justify. Every inspection is an opportunity to create fear-based spending. Every advisor is trained to maximize revenue per visit. Understanding their tactics, knowing actual service intervals, and having the discipline to decline recommendations until you verify their legitimacy protects you from scams that cost the average truck owner thousands of dollars over the vehicle's lifetime. The dealership will survive without your money. The question is whether your bank account will survive the dealership's manipulation tactics, and that depends entirely on whether you recognize the scams before they empty your wallet. The dealership will survive without your money. Recognize the scams before they empty your wallet.